You wake up tired. You lie there knowing exactly what you should do, but somehow your body refuses to move. And almost immediately, you judge yourself. Why am I so lazy? You sit down to work. The task isn't impossible. You know how to do it. Yet starting feels strangely exhausting. So you give yourself another label: weak, undisciplined, unmotivated. And after hearing it enough, you start believing it. But what if the problem isn't that you don't want to move forward? What if something inside you is pulling you backward? Because your brain isn't designed only to make you productive. One of its most important jobs is helping keep you safe. And when stress keeps building, your nervous system can respond in ways that don't always look dramatic. Sometimes, instead of fighting or running, you may shut down, avoid, withdraw, or feel stuck. From the outside, that can look like laziness. But the experience underneath it can be far more complicated. And once you understand what your mind and body may be responding to, you can stop relying only on shame and start finding a better way forward. Stress rarely arrives all at once. More often, you carry a little more every day until even ordinary things begin feeling heavy. Deadlines, expectations, messages, problems. Your mind may get a break from one pressure only for another to appear. And when your system keeps interpreting life as demanding or threatening, staying constantly activated can become exhausting. You can keep forcing yourself for a while. You push harder, demand more, and tell yourself to keep going. But sometimes the response isn't more energy. It's the opposite. You freeze. You might spend hours doing almost nothing, yet somehow you don't feel rested afterward. Even tiny responsibilities can begin looking enormous because you're not responding to just one task anymore. Your system may be responding to the accumulated pressure surrounding it. Avoidance can become an attempt to escape that load. That's why calling every moment of low motivation laziness can miss what's actually happening. Sometimes the question isn't, how do I force myself harder? It's, what has been making everything feel this heavy? Eventually, starting something small can feel strangely difficult. You know it's only one step, but your body treats it like 20. You look at the work. You understand what needs to happen. Yet there is resistance before you've even begun. Because you're not always reacting only to the task. You may also be reacting to everything you've connected to it. Pressure, fear of failing, fear of getting it wrong. Your mind can quietly learn that starting means discomfort. Then a normal responsibility starts casting a much bigger emotional shadow than the task itself deserves. So you reach for something easier, something that gives you temporary distance from that uncomfortable feeling. For a few minutes, avoidance feels good. That's exactly why it can become such a powerful habit. But the task doesn't disappear. You return later, and now you've added time pressure and guilt. Stress creates avoidance. Avoidance creates guilt. Guilt creates more stress. And suddenly you're trapped in a loop. Escaping it begins when you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What keeps this loop alive?" When you can't make yourself act, you may attack the easiest target, yourself. You think shame will create discipline. Instead, it often makes an already heavy experience heavier. Imagine being exhausted and having someone follow you around shouting, "You're useless." Would that really help you recover? Yet that's exactly how many people try to motivate themselves. Then comparison enters. Someone else seems productive, focused, and unstoppable. You see their visible progress without seeing their nervous system, circumstances, struggles, or support. So self-criticism becomes another source of pressure. And the energy you need to act gets consumed by the battle happening inside you. Progress may require putting down that weapon. Understanding yourself isn't making excuses. It's gathering the information needed to change. Here's another strange part. You can spend hours resting and still feel exhausted. Because physical inactivity doesn't automatically mean your system feels safe enough to recover. Your body may stop working while your mind keeps running. And endless stimulation can distract you without necessarily restoring you. Your attention keeps jumping from one signal to another. Sometimes recovery begins by reducing input instead of adding more entertainment. A few quiet minutes can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to constant stimulation. But gentle movement, daylight, and moments without demands can create a different experience. The goal isn't to become productive every second. The goal is learning what actually leaves you with more energy afterward. Your mind and body learn through repetition. If work repeatedly comes with panic and pressure, Even seeing the laptop can eventually trigger tension. If your phone repeatedly provides quick relief, reaching for it can become almost automatic. Trigger, feeling, response. Repeat it enough and the sequence gets easier to follow. That's why knowing what you should do isn't always enough. But learned patterns aren't permanent commands. You can begin changing the pattern by making the first action almost ridiculously small. Don't demand 2 hours. Open the document. Don't demand perfection. Complete one tiny action. Each manageable experience gives your system evidence that starting doesn't always have to mean overwhelm. Modern productivity advice often starts with the same command: do more. More habits, more goals, more systems, more discipline. But adding demands to an overloaded life can sometimes produce the opposite of what you want. You assume you need stronger discipline because force is the only strategy you've been taught. So you push against yourself harder. Then when you collapse again, you decide you didn't push hard enough. But what if progress doesn't require breaking through the wall? What if you could lower the difficulty of beginning? Sustainable action often looks less dramatic than motivation videos make it seem. Small steps aren't impressive, but repeated small steps can take you somewhere force never could. Feeling safer doesn't require pretending every problem has disappeared. Sometimes it starts with giving your body a signal that this moment is manageable. Basic things matter more than we like to admit. Then reduce the number of battles happening at once. Not everything on your list deserves equal urgency. Protecting your attention can reduce unnecessary stimulation. And when you begin working, create an ending your brain can trust. 10 focused minutes can feel safer than promising yourself an exhausting marathon. Stopping when you plan to stop teaches you that starting doesn't automatically trap you. You're beginning to build cooperation with yourself instead of constantly issuing threats. One of the biggest things you may need to rebuild isn't motivation. It's trust. If you constantly promise yourself impossible changes, your own plans stop feeling believable. Instead, make a promise small enough to keep. Then keep it. The difficult part may actually be refusing to turn one successful step into another impossible demand. If you promised 5 minutes, you're allowed to stop after 5. Every promise kept becomes a tiny piece of evidence. Do it again tomorrow, and another piece appears. Eventually, you're building a different relationship with action. Big goals become less threatening when you trust yourself to approach them without punishment. Many of us are waiting for motivation to arrive before we begin. But motivation is unreliable. Some days it simply doesn't show up. Fortunately, action doesn't always need to begin with a powerful feeling. Sometimes you begin while still tired, uncertain, and resistant, just at a manageable scale. Then something changes. You've created evidence of progress. Progress can create a little energy. That energy makes another small action easier. And action begins producing momentum instead of waiting for motivation. You don't need to feel unstoppable. You only need an entry point small enough that you can actually enter. Maybe the exhausting part wasn't only your workload. Maybe it was spending every day fighting yourself. What happens when you stop treating your own resistance like an enemy? You may discover something underneath it: exhaustion, overwhelm, fear, pressure, or needs you've been ignoring. Those things don't mean you can never change. They give you somewhere more useful to begin. You can investigate what increases your resistance and what genuinely helps you function better. And slowly, the identity you've repeated for years begins losing its grip. Instead of immediately saying, "I'm lazy," you learn to listen. Then you can respond intentionally instead of automatically punishing yourself. Understanding doesn't remove responsibility. It can make meaningful change more possible. So tomorrow, don't wake up demanding that you become a completely different person. Choose one thing small enough to feel possible. Reduce unnecessary friction around it. Give yourself a clear beginning and a believable ending. Then acknowledge that you did what you said you would do. And when you rest, practice letting rest actually be rest, not another opportunity to attack yourself. Safe enough to begin. Small enough to do. Repeatable enough to become a pattern. You don't have to carry shame everywhere you go just to prove that you care about your life. Real discipline doesn't have to mean being at war with yourself. It can mean learning how to move forward even when motivation is quiet. So the next time you hear yourself say, "I'm just lazy," don't stop there. Ask what your mind and body are responding to, choose one manageable next step, and begin rebuilding trust. Because lasting progress isn't about becoming someone you can finally force. It's about becoming someone you can finally work with.